Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and today I am joined by Mark Livesey from Treeline Academy, and we're going to talk a little bit more about e-scouting for elk. And today, if you haven't listened to the previous ones, we've done a series of these. There's a playlist on my YouTube of all of those. You can go to Mark's Treeline Academy website, and there's going to be a list of all the podcasts he's done with me, along with everyone else you've done. He's a podcast. I don't want to use the word. He's not loyal to just one podcast.
I always say, I've got a face for radio, right? You're one of the few podcasts that go on YouTube. So people are going to see me with my glasses and my, but I've got a voice. I've got a face for radio is what I always say.
Yeah. Well, I don't agree. Like, you're an ex-Ironman athlete. There's a little manliness there that comes with that. But we've covered this a couple of times. If you haven't listened to those other ones, you might want to go back. We're going to skip ahead straight to this module, this topic we're covering today, and it's about fires and
logging areas. We're going so we're trying to do this series on the different modules of the course, so we can we kind of get off track a little, but the focus of each one of these modules is to kind of introduce you to some of the concepts that are in each one of these modules, and hopefully, not only introduce you what's in the course, but give you a few tips that you can apply to your elk hunting strategy or your hunt planning or however the way you do it. My way isn't the only way. It's just a way. And so, we talked about this in the last podcast. I think hunters, if you want to become a next level hunter, you have to focus on your gear and your fitness, of course, but I think that we get too focused on that sometimes. I know I do. I get obsessed with what gear I'm running, how fit I am, what can I do this? Can I do that? Especially as I get older, it's becoming more of an issue. But at the same time, not neglecting our knowledge. I mean, it's really important that we look for ways. That's why you're listening to this podcast. I mean, of course, some of it's entertainment, but every time you listen to a podcast, you're not only listening to it to be entertained. Hopefully you're going to walk away with some life improvement nuggets, some hunting, depends on what type of podcast you're listening to, business improvement. Yeah. And that's really what this series is about is, having some fun with it, which we always do, but also really giving you some very specifics, on maybe a new way to look at things or how to break it down. So anyway, maybe that's a good enough introduction. But so
I think that, for those that don't know, Mark has this course. It's been up for a couple of years now.
I'm about a year and a half now. It's pretty new.
Everyone who has purchased it, the word has been thank you, thank you, thank you. So it's got it to me. It's really proven. But for those who aren't ready to pull the trigger on that, aren't sure if they want to, you're going to get a lot out of just listening to the podcast, and we're hoping to bring value there too. But also, it might boost your confidence in investing in the class.
Sure. And, again, I'm not here to necessarily sell you on the course. I just want to present it to you, and you make your own judgment. Yep. There's a lot of information at treelineacademy.net just about the course. There's an intro video. There's the list of all the modules, the agenda. And like I said, there's a plethora of podcasts that you get listened to. Yeah. Pretty much a whole year's worth of
There's so much good information in there. So the last one that we did was drainages.
Canyons, creeks, and drainages. Yeah.
So we kind of touched on that just a little bit, and that was the previous one we did. And now we're getting into this one. And then there's a whole, I think, 6 other ones from before, 5 or 6 other ones.
Yeah. So this one's about the middle of the elk finding features. So this is like about number 5, I think, of the 10 elk finding features. But this one's fires and logging areas.
Okay, tell me about this, because this is something I get questions about all the time.
This is probably this is the module I get the most questions on. And this is probably where people think that fires are
magical.
They're magical when it comes to elk, and it's the end all. And there's no doubt, guys, fires are freaking good for elk. Now, I talk about when I first get in the course, I talk about, it's, if you live in the West for any length of time, fires, it's a love-hate relationship. Like right now we are smoked in out here in the West. Missoula's terrible. You can't see, you can't breathe. There's fires everywhere. It's super dry and it's stressful. I mean, praise the firefighters and the people that are out there. I mean, guys, this stuff it's devastating. It's brutal for on long. So, I don't want to celebrate.
It doesn't help.
That's right. I'm not here to celebrate wildfires, but what I am here to do is, when it comes to elk hunting, is show you that there is at least a silver lining to these things. And hopefully, as a community, we will start to educate ourselves on proper logging and thinning and taking the right steps to manage this incredible resource we have, which maybe we have not done such a good, and I'm not here to debate that either. What we're here to talk about is fires and how they relate to elk hunting, not to debate whether it's a positive or a negative.
Yep.
But I read a report. I was going to start off with this, that there's several studies that I've read for fires. There's a lot of information about fires and animal and wildlife and even elk use of fires. So I spent a lot of time when I developed this course researching, because I've always found a lot of elk in and around fire areas. And I want to know why. I'm one of those guys that it's one thing to know that they're attracted to them. What I want to know is, why are they attracted to them? What brings them to it? What keeps them there? What is their driving force? And just all the details around it. So in this module, there's a lot of reference to research, a lot of numbers, a lot of things to kind of get you started before we start getting into breaking them down. So I want to just throw out a couple of things. Is one, there's been several cases where elk populations have increased by more than 70% in areas that have had fires. That's an incredible number.
Yeah, it's huge.
A 70% increase in elk numbers.
Wow.
And it's just related to the tremendous growth and regrowth. And just the
It's not all that surprising, though.
No, not really.
When you look at a super timbered area.
Right. Now, when I say that, I mean that in densely timbered areas.
Yeah. When you look at stuff like that, and then all of a sudden, it's just gone, and it's grass as far as you can see, as it comes back, if it's the right kind of burn and everything, and it bounces in, you could just see how animals that were normally didn't have the feed and all the growth opportunity, all of a sudden they do. And their options for avoiding predators dramatically increase because their food sources are more broad and dispersed. And I could see it.
So now remember, when I say 70% increase, that doesn't mean it increased the population of elk by 70%. I may have misspoke. It increases it in that area. So that may mean that elk are moving to that area because it's a more desired location.
Yep, absolutely.
But it also means it can support more.
Either way, as a hunter, I don't care.
That's right. So we're not
I just know the burn's magic.
So, what most people don't understand about fires is that they think about the grass that grows up into fires. But when I started researching it, that's not what the elk are after in those fires. Most people think of elk as grazers, which I did too.
Aren't they, though, like compared to a deer? They're much more of a grazer than a
absolutely.
browser.
But elk are very, I don't want to say one-dimensional because that's not, but their stomachs are, when I did the research on the basic needs of elk, which is another module in the course, it was surprising to me how elk will switch food sources. Like they're not real good like deer or browsers. They can eat a variety of food sources at the same time. Elk don't tend to do that as much. They tend to focus on one type, then the next type, then the next type, and their digestive system adjusts to do it. So what happens with these fire areas is that it presents this opportunity for regrowth of grasses, but more importantly, the woody plants and the shrubs and the flowering, the forbs. The increase in the flowering plants or the forbs or the bigger leaf plants. Those are what I believe the elk are targeting as much or more than the quote grasses that are growing up. So, and that goes along with some of the research as well. So what it creates is elk, that variety of vegetation. Remember what I said, how elk don't tend to eat a lot of variety at the same time.
Yeah.
But they eat a lot of variety over the course of a year. So what I'm saying is these fire areas can support the elk during the times that they're more dependent and more focused on grass, like in May, June.
Yep.
Then as they start to switch to more or forbs in the early season, to grasses mid-season, to woody plants and brush in winter and late season. So it has it all, is what I'm saying, is that these fires generate this plethora or this variety, especially on the edges. We're going to talk about that. but the edges of these fires are the key focal areas for the vegetation group. 50% of the vegetation variety in a burn happens within 50 feet of the edge. It's crazy. That how much variety of vegetation is available just a little out into the open, just a little into the timber, both sides.
Really?
Both sides, because certain forbs require a certain amount of shade. They can't grow in direct sunlight. Certain brushy plants or woody plants, same thing. They thrive with the right amounts of sunlight versus not direct sunlight. So these edge habitats are really vital when it comes to evaluating fires. So, one of the other things that I found, most people think of burns of being a 2 to 3 year old burn is prime time for elk. And I'm not saying it's not, but most of the studies that I've read indicate that elk really key in on burns from 10 to 12 years. Now, as he gets closer to that 12, the attraction is waning. Okay. That doesn't mean that it's not there. It obviously is at its peak in that 2 to 3, but don't discount a fire completely because it's in the 5 to 7. Again, it depends on the fire, depends on the regrowth, depends on how much shade it's getting, how devastating was the fire, what time of year the fire started. All these things can contribute to, quote, the life expectancy of a fire as it relates to the attractiveness to this elk. One of the fires that I really like to hunt, this one area. So you guys, if you've listened to much of my stuff, you guys know that I'm kind of a new area guy, meaning I do not go back to the same places very often. And I know that does not help my success. I know, I understand, but I'm an adventurer. I love new places and I love developing new places. And so maybe if I have any skill at e-scouting, maybe that's one of the reasons why is because I'm always developing new spots. Like on my elk planning right now, I've gone so overboard this year. I've only got 1 or 2 elk tags this year. So I'm just wearing it out in Montana. And I've got like 12 places I'm looking at right now, 12 different locations. And I'm just struggling like, okay, which one? And so I just haven't figured it out yet. I keep working on all of them. And one of them is going to rise to the top and I'm going to make a pick or make my choice at some point. But there's this one area that I have been back to 3 times, and I have sent several of my friends in there. Every single one of my friends have gone in there and have killed elk. And it's a burn, and it's a 6-7 year old burn, but it's got the right mix. And one of the things that everybody's going to ask is, what is that mix? Well, this particular burn burnt very strangely. It jumped. It would burn a pocket and somehow it would jump, like it got in the crown and it went over to, I don't know the fire terminology, but I'm just telling you what this created was a mosaic. I call it a mosaic pattern where the edge is like it's just squiggly. It's not a square burn. A lot of fires will burn to an edge and it'll be a straight line. This one did not. This one burnt down into ditches and left the entire ditch alone. It burned up on the ridge and left half the ridge not burned. And then it burnt over the ridge and burned a whole big basin. And it was just, I think that randomness of the burn created such a diverse amount of vegetation. And it has some low-lying areas that were holding moisture. And those areas that were holding moisture, the grass in there was chest, neck deep. It was unbelievable. And it's still like that 6-7 years later. So I think that particular burn, because of the way it burnt, the mosaic pattern it left, and the sheer amount of edge habitat that it left, and the low-lying moisture holding areas, and it was not a steep area. It was moderately steep. We talked about that in the last podcast real quickly. But guys, burns that happen on super steep slopes tend to take longer to regrow because of the moisture content.
Right.
So when you're evaluating and you're looking at terrain and you see 30-degree slopes and it's a burn, you're like, maybe I'm going to give that one 3 to 4 years to be prime. It may not be as good year 1 or 2. Yeah. Guys are always telling me like, well, out, for example, in Missouri River, the Missouri River breaks area of Montana, we've had some of the biggest fires in Montana have been out there in the last few years. And the deer, now mainly deer and elk, are moving into these fires year one. Like they burn 1 year and the next year there's animals in those burns.
Really?
And everybody's like, why? And I'm like, well, the main reason is because they're at a gentle slope. Mm-hmm. They're holding moisture. They're growing back quicker than some of these steeper burns. So it's just one thing to keep in mind. And we cover a lot of that in the course, but pay attention to the boundaries. The more jagged the edge, the more I tend to like it. The more entrance and exit points to the burn, I like. And what I mean by that is drainages that run into the burns, guys. When you look at these in Google Earth and you're zooming in and you see a drainage that runs out into a burn, and the burn is gray. It looks gray on Google Earth. And you're looking at it in August. You're looking at it in July. If you could find that historical imagery, that's one of the reasons I like Google Earth, is because I can look at the dates of the imagery. It's really important in fires. Again, using the right tool for the job. If you're using only Onyx, if you're using only Gaia or Gohan or whatever you're using, this is not available because you can't look at the dates. You have no idea what you're looking at. So if I'm looking at an August picture and I see this burn and it's all gray and I see this green ribbon running out of the timber out into the burn, I'm like, that's got my attention. That ribbon runs into the timber. What that's telling me, and then I'll switch over to the topographic map and I see, sure enough, it's a small drainage that's reaching out in that burn. I can almost guarantee you that the elk are coming and going from that burn in that spot. Mm. You know, they're not going to walk out in a burn and cross the entire burn to get to that drainage. Now, I shouldn't say they won't. Again, it's an odds thing.
Yeah.
The odds are, if there's these drainages, a few of these drainages around this burn, guys, it's the first place to check. That's the entrances and exits. Even look for burns. And when you're looking at a burn too, look for burns that have these island timber patches. So what happens in a burn sometimes is there'll be a high moisture content area and it will burn. Like, for example, where an aspen patch is. A lot of times when there's mixed environments, meaning conifers and aspens, and there's a burn, a lot of times the aspens will survive because they're in the higher moisture content areas. The grass is greener, less likely to burn. And so you'll see these island timber patches. Some of the best elk hunting I've ever had has been in these, 40, 50, 100 acre timber patches in the middle or out on off the edges of these burns. They're like security islands for these elk. They can get in those islands and they can bed in there. They've got thermal protection from the sun. They can go out into the fire and feed at night and in the mornings, but then regress right back into these islands and they can see 360. So they just feel so secure in these little island patches. So don't overlook those. Again, and the more edge environment, the better. So when it comes to fires, you're looking at the age of the fire, but you're also looking at the design or the makeup of the fire. Pay close attention, zoom out, study the fire. Also study where are people? Because guys, fires are elk magnets. I mean, fires are hunter magnets as much as they are elk magnets. Let's just be honest. And now with all the technology, being able to look at fires and see them and all the hunt platforms and everything, everybody sees them. So let's just be honest about that. Where is the pressure coming from? We've talked about zones of pressure a million times, but where does the pressure come into these fires? Look where the roads are. Look for the trailheads. Are they on this? If the trailhead is over here on the north side of this burn, well, that north edge of that burn, I'm talking a huge burn, let's say it's a 20,000 acre burn, and there's a trailhead on the north side, well, that north edge of that burn is probably going to get hit more than the south edge of that burn. I mean, I know that's common sense, guys, but sometimes guys do not zoom out enough and take the look at the big picture. If they built roads in, a lot of these burns get logged after the fact, right? Mm-hmm. So they put roads in. Those roads are not on topography maps a lot of times. Study them. Zoom in on Google Earth. Look for those roads. Look at how people are going to move around those burns. Look for those regresses. Look for those drainages. Any drainage that enters a burn, I am interested in. I'm super interested in it. One, because I know there's higher moisture content there. Two, I know that's going to grow back quicker than other places. And three, it's a location that's got the most variety of vegetation because of those three things. So sometimes it can be daunting to look at a big, giant 30,000 acre burn. And where am I going to start? Because, guys, sometimes hiking across a burn is not very fun, especially if it's an older burn and the timber starts to come down or you get a storm, stuff starts hitting the ground.
That's what I was going to say is how, like, sometimes the burns are just, they seem unhuntable because they're just a bunch of tinker toy logs, just, matchstick box got just dumped.
Guys, study the years, okay? And, I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but use the right tool for the job. Guys, the only way to look at fires on a high level is on Google Earth Pro. It's the only way. Because what you need to do is you need to be able to scroll back through the years. You can obviously see when the fire started, okay? Mm-hmm. And then you can go back in Google Earth. If let's say it's a 5-year-old fire and there are images in the 5-year, guys, you can zoom in and see if the timber's on the ground. You can see it. So how you tell? Sometimes they're like, well, I can't really tell if the timber's on the ground. I'm going to tell you a quick way to look at it. Look for the shadows, okay? When the timber is standing, when you look at it in Google Earth, you can see the dark shadow on the ground. It's subtle, but look for the shadows of the standing timber. If you can't see very many shadows, then the timber's on the ground. Or a lot of timber's on the ground. So look for the numbers of shadows that you can see. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I know that sounds obvious, but I don't know a lot of guys that do that. So when you're looking at Google Earth and you're zoomed in, you're looking at the shadow of it. If you can see the shadows, you're like, okay, there's a lot of timber still standing. Timber. Mm-hmm. And you can start to make some judgment calls on how much is on the ground and how much is still standing. And so now that doesn't mean the elk aren't using it if it's on the ground. That does not mean that. But what it means for you is you got to plan your strategy on how you're going to hunt it because they can become very difficult. And I'm going to be honest with you, they can become dangerous. So burns are not only hard to navigate, but they can be downright dangerous because, guys, do not pitch your tents in burns. I mean, come on. If the timber is standing, do not put your tent in there. Get on the edge, get away from all the widowmakers. It's super dangerous. And the daggers they create, I have a friend of mine that ran a tree stop through his calf, completely through his calf. And because these trees, when they die, pine trees, they create these nasty, sharp spikes. As you were cutting off a bunch of them for my llamas. Yeah. When we were on that bear hunt, you were up in front with that saw, just sawing off everything you could because they're dangerous to us and they were dangerous to the llamas. Yeah. And, so don't lose track. I know that's, seems obvious. I just want sometimes I feel like the obvious gets forgotten. Yeah. So the shadows are an important tip when you're looking at, and then look back historical, guys. We're going to talk about this later. We talk about beetle kills, but beetle kill evaluation is critical, and fires, some of the same techniques that we use in beetle kills can be used in fires as well, is looking back and aging that fire. Okay. So you can also go to a site called InsaWeb. I may have pronounced that wrong, but it's INCI, or it's where they log all the information about all Western fires. Okay. And you can see when the fire started. They tell you lots of information about the fire. How long did it burn? When did they get it out? Just all these things, because, for example, let's just use an example. We had a fire here in Montana. I'm going to probably draw everybody over to it by Red Lodge that started in June of this year. This fire went in June. It was pretty massive, pretty quick. Mm-hmm. It scared a lot of people. But the firefighters and the smoke jumpers, these guys were on it. And they got this dang thing pretty much out now already, which is rare in the West for a fire to be put out in June. So think about here. We got this big fire now in Red Lodge, which is, good elk area. Okay, let's be honest. That started in June, that is already out. By next year, this fire could be money because it started early. There's already going to be some regrowth this fall. Yeah. So by next season, this 1-year-old fire could be money. I'm just speculating, guys, on this. I'd want to look at it a little closer myself. But what would I look at? Well, first thing I'd look at, what's the steepness of that terrain? That's the very first thing I'd look at. If I'm looking at a 1-year-old fire, first thing I want to know is how steep is the terrain? Excuse me. If it's super steep, I'm going to be like, okay, it's probably not going to regrow. The next thing I would look at is moisture content. So this year it's pretty dang dry in Montana, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to keep that in mind. Okay, so we've got a 1-year fire. It started early, but we are dry. Maybe. I don't know. You just see what we're doing here. We're kind of thinking about it from a logical standpoint. But if I saw a fire that started in August and they didn't get it out, they never got it out, and the snow put it out in October, like what happens a lot, or the rain when the rains come, then I might not be super excited about that fire the next year, even if the slope is good. Okay. So keep in mind when this started, what month it started is important, as not only all these other factors that we talked about. So
you cover that in more detail. You show people the shadows.
We go over example. I have 8 or 9 examples of burns, of the mosaic patterns. I show you what it looks like, what it doesn't look like. Even some examples of straight edge burns.
Yeah.
So you know how a lot of times a fire will burn up to a ridge and it'll burn itself out, and it will leave a straight line. Guys, that doesn't mean that that's bad.
So how does a guy tell the difference between beetle kill and a burn?
Okay. So here's one of the things, and I'm not dissing on. I'm glad you said that because I was going to bring this up. I always feel like I got to preface this because I get so much. Oh man, you could just hate Onyx. I do not hate Onyx. I do not hate Gaia. I love all the tools, guys. I'm just a tool guy. Okay, I don't get emotionally attached to my hunt platforms, and you shouldn't either.
Yeah.
So that's tip number 2.
Yeah.
So if you only use hunt platforms, let me back up. What I've seen, Brian, in e-scouting, what has happened is guys used to live on Google Earth, right?
Yeah.
They lived on it.
We did.
Yeah. Okay. And then when Onyx came out, and they just organized all these tools and they just abandoned Google Earth. They're doing all their stuff on the hunt platforms.
Onyx, yeah.
Great. But they forgot why they were using Google Earth. So Google Earth is hands down, no question, the best e-scouting tool on planet Earth, and it probably will be for some time. Because no matter what these platforms do, they cannot recreate the situation that's in Google Earth.
Sure.
And here's one of the examples. Fires, okay? Onyx goes back to about 2002, okay? I think Gaia goes back to about 1999, whatever the and I saw that Go Hunt only goes back to like 2006, maybe. It doesn't matter. Don't get caught up in that detail. What I'm pointing out here is that they only go back so far. So when you start to look at an area and you see something that looks like a burn and you're not sure, and you're like, is that a beetle kill? Potentially or is that an old burn that they don't have marked? How do you know? Go to Google Earth. And you download the fire layer with the way I tell you how to get the fire layer. So you go to this resource. This is the same resource that Onyx uses, guys. The same resources that Gaia uses. You can go to this site and you can download this layer called MTBS, and it's all of the fires in in North America since 1988. I always double check every single hunt area that I ever develop. I will look at in Google Earth and I will turn on that fire layer to make sure I didn't miss a really old fire. Not that I care that much. I mean, I just want to know, because I want to know how bad it could be, how much regrowth it could be. Is all the timber on the ground now? And so
that's the part that is a real issue. You know, trying to hunt an area where there's logs at your waist.
Guys, I can't stress to you. So, we talked about this in the previous module, a glassing spot and planning your route to the glassing spot, right? Fires are almost more important, that you plan your hunt route, how are you going to walk and navigate this fire? The prevailing winds, thinking about where the winds are going to be coming from, how you're going to move around, where you're going to camp, how you're going to navigate this burn, because you don't want to show up to a burn with no plan.
Yeah. So let's go back to the beetle stuff. You have all this mass die off from beetles. The trees start to fall down. You have some similar
characteristics
as a fire.
Right.
What do you prefer? A fire?
I'm a beetle kill guy.
Okay.
For lots of reasons. And we'll talk, don't get ahead. We got a beetle kill module. You're like, oh yeah, let's get off on that.
Okay, so we'll cover that.
We're going to cover beetle kills. Now, I love fires and beetle kills. I don't get me wrong, but if I had to pick, I'd pick the beetle kill.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you why I'd pick the beetle kill for my own personal reasons when we get to that module. But fires, Very similar evaluation tactics. Okay. Zooming in on Google Earth, using the historical timeline slider, really important when you're analyzing fires. Using the fire layer in Google Earth so you can see all the old fires that are not available in the hunt platform. Guys, this podcast, that tip right there was probably worth the whole podcast. Just letting you know that a layer exists, a KML file exists for Google Earth that you can download and install into your Google Earth that will show you every fire in North America since 1988. One of the other things it shows is when you click on the fire, it's got about 25 characteristics to that fire. So a lot more information is available than what's available on the hunt platform. So for example, I've been picking on OnX. So let's just say Gaia. So we're in Gaia and we click on the fire in Gaia for more information, right?
Yeah.
Tells us how many acres, tells us what date the fire is, right?
Yep.
That's about it. But when you go to Google Earth, what do you get? You get the month it started. That's key. You get the year, obviously. You get all of the fires, clear back to 1988. You get sometimes you get links to the fire data, like the InstaWeb stuff. You get when they got it put out. You get lots of things in Google Earth that you will not get in the hunt platforms when it comes to learning about this particular fire.
Okay.
So, for example, I will look at a fire in OnX. I'll be like, okay, I see it's a recent fire. I will almost always jump over to Google Earth just real quick, and I'll click on the fire and see if there's any more information available that's not available here. Guys, if there's one thing you're going to learn for me, that if there's anything you're going to learn, is historical knowledge kills elk. Okay. What I mean by that is the more knowledge you put in your head about your hunt area, the better your odds of killing an elk. Is it the silver bullet? No. Knowing this fire information, knowing when it started, when it was put out, is that the silver bullet to killing elk? No. But when you stack that with the next piece of information, with the next piece of information, with the mosaic patterns, with the entrance and exits, with the all the things we talked about, the island meccas, the island patches, these things all start to come together. And when you look at a fire, you start looking at it in a different mindset than you know. Most hunters look, oh, there's a fire, I'm going to go there and hunt elk. They don't know why. They just heard somebody say in a 1-minute e-scouting video that fires are good for elk. And so I'm going to go to this fire.
Right. So when I lived in Oregon, we were often targeting clear cuts for blacktail and for elk. And that was kind of a big deal, major deal, actually, because the more clear cuts, the more that the actual elk habitat exists, especially when you're hunting the West Coast.
Right.
But I got to admit, since I've been hunting, more of the Idaho, Montana, Colorado, type of areas, Wyoming, I'm not really dealing with as many clear cuts as I have in other states.
Well, you're not looking for them as much.
Okay.
Because you're not focused on them, because they're not. And let's just face it, in Washington and Oregon, that is the elk finding feature.
Yeah.
It's one of the top features, right?
Right.
Well, in Montana, we've got other features. We got these fires.
Yeah.
We've got these massive beetle kills that they don't have there.
Yeah.
We've got different landscape. We've got glassing opportunities that are not available in Oregon.
For sure.
And right? We can see the elk before we kill the elk in some areas.
Yep.
And there's just all these other things that you've replaced. So what you just said is what we talked about before, is that you don't know why you're doing it. You're just an experienced enough hunter. You've started looking at all these other features and they're attracting you. And maybe you hit on something. Maybe in Montana, maybe we shouldn't say this. Maybe in Montana that the log areas are being overlooked. Maybe if you spend some time looking at timber patches, let's just stop there.
Yeah.
How do you know where the timber patches are? How do you know how old the timber harvest is? How do you know what they do?
A lot of people don't find out until they show up in their hunting area and they stumble on it.
Did they clear cut it? Did they just fire suppress it? Did they thin it? Did they, was it fire prevention? What was the mechanism? What kind of operation was it? Did they build roads in there? Did they not build roads in there? How long did it go on?
Yeah.
Well, if you go to OnX and you look at timber, it's going to tell you, they've got a timber layer. You can turn it on. It'll show you the clear cuts. It'll give you a couple details about the timber.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Guys, in Google, I know I'm a broken record when it comes to Google Earth, but this same website that has the fire layer has the logging operations layer for the whole entire North America. Guys, and then now you can't just download it and install it into Google Earth. I don't want to get into the technical weeds here, but it's too big. It's over 1 gig. Okay. It's a giant file. So what you have to do is it's called restrict to view. That's all I'm going to get into. So you have to install it with a restrict to view. And once you do that, then you can use it. But when you click on the fire in Google Earth, you would not believe the list of information that comes up that's available. The Forest Service provides all this information. It tells you who the operation is doing the thinning. You can call. It's got numbers sometimes. It's got when it started. Is it still going on? Is it active? Is it closed? The road network integration. Did they replant the roads? Did they reseed the roads? All this information is there that's not in the hunt platforms. So if you are focused on timber and logging areas, if you're in Oregon and Washington, my gosh, you need to be using this tool on Google Earth.
Yeah.
It's a mecca. It's a mecca of information about these about these logging areas. So in this module, I go over quite a bit of the logging stuff, but I've got a lot of emails. To believe it or not, Brian, my top 2 states of members in my course is Washington, Oregon. So I'm getting a lot of heat to do more on logging. So I will have more coming in the logging stuff.
Very cool. Well, dude, I think this gives people a taste. There's a lot of good information in this, Yeah.
We talked a little fast and a little.
You're trying to get through it, but
I think it gave some guys some, at least some tidbits to look at. And, when it comes to fires, guys, last thing I'm going to say about it is for me, it's another odds multiplier. Okay. It's not the odds multiplier.
Yeah.
So I think as an elk hunter, you have to work really hard not to become one dimensional. It's like, man, I only hunt bulls. I only hunt elk in fires. I only hunt elk in logging areas. I only hunt elk in north facing drainages. I only hunt in canyons with no trails in the bottom.
Yeah.
No, we're looking for is all these things wrapped up. When I find these things that have all these features, like when I find fire zones that have the canyons like we talked about and has the meadows like we talked about even prior, I start getting excited about that thing. When I see meadows with halos around them in a fire close to the edge, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
So
that's like people who say, I only hunt elk if I only call elk.
Right.
Like, well, why not a little spot and stock? Why not a little ambush from a tree stand? Why not? I don't care.
No, tree stands. Come on. No,
I don't care.
You're crossing the line.
I don't care if I can kill a big bull in a public land hunt. I'll use whatever tool is in my toolbox.
Well, it's funny you said that, Brian, because even myself, okay, I spent most of my years coming from Missouri. So I hunted Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, and that was back when you could actually draw a tag in New Mexico.
Yeah.
I had a hard time driving through states that had elk to get to other states that had elk.
Yeah.
So I just stop in those states and hunt elk. Well, I hunted in thicker areas. So I was more of a caller, like you said. I didn't really branch out into a spot and stock or more of a glassing style elk hunter until I got to Montana and started looking at some of the areas that I'm like, whoa, these areas are way more open.
Yeah.
This is a whole different type of elk hunting.
My kind of elk hunting right there.
Idaho has a lot of that type of as well. Now, Idaho has some thick stuff too in the northern parts. But like you said, I'm trying to become less one-dimensional, even myself. Even 30 years into this, we can always learn. Guys, I'm telling you, when I put together this fire module, for example, I did not know half of what I found out when I started researching this thing.
Yeah.
I thought I knew everything about fires because I hunt elk in fire areas a lot.
Yep.
But when I started reading all these research papers and all the reasons why elk, I did not understand the edge. I knew I was finding elk on the edge. I didn't know why. Now I know why. Just the research really gave me a lot of the whys and really started to clear up the picture of why elk use burns, when they use them, how long they use them, and why they prefer them. Now, one thing I will say real quick, I know we're going to move on, but guys, the wolves are changing the games a little bit in burns and logged areas. it's pushing elk out of them more and more.
Yeah.
Because on the bear hunt we were on, when we saw that black wolf, where was he at? On the logging road.
Yep.
Cruising a logged area. Well, a burn logged area.
Cut area, yeah.
So these elk can be, depends on the terrain and the areas, obviously, but they can be more susceptible to wolf predation when they're in these areas.
Yeah, you have to start accounting for the wolf factor.
You have to nowadays. It's a Western factor that you cannot ignore.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can't quite tell some of that. It's such a new phenomena for a lot of us that have been hunting elk our whole lives.
Right.
Because they're just reaching certain critical population levels in certain areas where the elk have completely, we're learning as we go as hunters. Okay, this is how the elk handle wolves. So
when you're looking at burns, I'm not saying don't hunt them because there could be wolves in there. That's definitely not it, because they're definitely not true. But just keep in mind that, if you're in an area and you're seeing a lot of wolf sign, you're seeing a lot of wolf scat, and you're hunting a burn, you might not want to invest entire 5 days in that burn if you're not seeing elk, because there might be a reason you're not seeing them. But the reason you're not seeing them is not because there's not vegetation there. It's because the wolves have got them pushed out of there at this time.
They're too easy to kill in that particular spot.
They're vulnerable in those areas.
Especially, when they have offspring that is a certain age still. But what I found in areas with burns on steeper slopes in wolf country, they spend time in those burns. When it's flat in wolf country,
that's right.
They're not down there in those burns anymore. They were 20 years ago, 15 years ago. They're not there anymore.
That's right.
And I'm finding elk up in burns up high, and they're thriving up, and that's where they spend their time because the escape routes are a little easier from wolves up in there. The one thing about wolves is they can run down an elk, get them tired, split one off, rip its hamstring and bring it down. I don't think people realize how easy it is for a wolf to kill an elk.
Yeah.
When you look at the bite force of a wolf, I put it in the recent videos.
That blew I did not know that.
1,500 pounds of pressure per
I could not believe that when you compared it to the average dog. Didn't you compare it?
The strongest dog is the Kangal, and it's a Turkish type of wolf dog, and it's 700.
So not even half. Not even half.
And the next strongest, they say, is maybe a Doberman at 600. A couple other dogs. Most dogs are around 4 or 5. Yeah. So you're talking about 1,500 psi on a plus. When you look at the teeth on a wolf versus the teeth on your dog at home, you realize that's like comparing a human's teeth to like a mythical werewolf.
Yeah.
Those wolf teeth are a whole nother level of nasty. They make domestic dogs look like not the same. They're just
totally different.
Totally different
genome.
So when you look at that, you realize it doesn't take much for a wolf to just grab onto and rip a tendon in half. And when a hamstring goes, that elk can't go anymore. Yeah. It's done. And then the pack can pull it down, and it's a relatively it doesn't have much of a chance. How do wolves? When I was in BC up north in the Cassiar Mountain Range, there was a pack of 30 over here and a pack of 30 wolves over here. We just watched them. There's 60 wolves within 200 yards of each other, and they kind of intermingled and howled, and the two packs. Maybe it was two packs, maybe it was one massive pack. I don't know. Anything they choose to go after with that many numbers, though, is dead.
Yeah.
Anything they choose. But what did the moose do? I'm like, how did the moose survive this? Well, the moose go into those willow patches that are neck deep and so thick that they can just walk into the midst of them, and the wolves just can't chase them in there.
Yeah.
And they can run around in there all day. The moose and the wolves just can't get to them.
And they can defend themselves better in that close quarter kind of operation.
I mean, the wolves have to squirm in there.
They can't surround them as easily, and that's the same thing.
And so the wolves know that. They know that the moose run to these patches, so they're trying to catch them in these areas before they can get into these escape areas. Right?
They look both ways before they run.
Totally. And what you start to put together is you start to see these. Same with the elk we were running into this the spring during bear season, they were in the steepest stuff.
I couldn't believe where we were
that were neck deep, where these elk were just getting on these slopes, like in that canyon where we crossed the river and go up the other side. You'd see 20 elk just where you'd see like a bighorn sheep, and they're on the slope that's ridiculous, but it's neck deep, and no wolf is going to get in there and get them. Period. So they're spending a lot of time browsing and hanging out there all day long. Would they be there if there wasn't wolf pressure? No, that's a lot. That's not their preferred location.
Well, they have to work harder for food in that environment.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest. They're not walking out into open meadow grazing. Be so nice to be able to do that. But every time they walk on that meadow, start grazing, they got their hamstrings being chewed on.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long. Elk are smarter than we give them credit for.
Right. And they start to figure out, well, I can feed in that meadow so long as I have this hill to run to.
Yeah.
You know, and I can get there, or I can cross this river and leave the wolf behind, or whatever it is. And you start to see a little change. But you add that to your e-scouting arsenal, and you can start to really get lethal.
Factor. Like Brian just said, putting that historical knowledge in this wolf behavioral analysis is just one of those historical knowledge. You start looking at areas, okay, I'm going to do some research. I'm going to see what kind of, guys, they really study the wolves. I mean, the states that have wolves, they've got a good idea where they're at.
Yeah.
They got pack names. They've got pack ranges. Guys, it's all available on the website.
These wolves know where these kill boxes are.
Oh, yeah.
They have these areas where if an elk walks through this kill box, they kill it. Like, it can't get away. Like, it's the perfect trap. The wolves know it. The elk figure it out over time, and the only ones that ever go through there are the ones that didn't get the memo, and you'll see areas where guys were like, dude, I used to hunt elk in that canyon, and they were always bedded up right there. I haven't seen elk in there in 10 years. Well, because it's no longer conducive to elk given wolves being there. And that's just something that people are adapting to as we move forward.
Well, as a hunter, we have to, just to highlight that point anymore. So I guide llama trips in Yellowstone. I think you know that. Mm-hmm. Well, one of the trips I take every year that I really like is the Black Canyon of the Yellowstone, which is where the Yellowstone River, comes out of Yellowstone. And, they call it the Black Canyon or, Hell's Canyon or whatever. Mm-hmm. Brian, you would not believe the deadheads in there.
Really?
Now, you obviously can't bring out sheds in Yellowstone, so people leave them. But I've been all over Yellowstone on these. I've never seen anything like this.
Really?
But it's exactly what you talk about. It's a canyon. It's a box canyon. And it's the migration corridor for elk that still live in Yellowstone, which is not many.
They have to use it.
And they have to come out. And they're all, every deadhead we find is the giant ones.
Yeah.
They're giant because it's those last bulls that are waiting. They don't want to leave the park because they know that there's an arsenal of gun hunters in Gardner waiting for them to come out. Yep. But I'm guessing here. I don't know for sure
what the reasons are.
But we're hiking up the trail and it's just like there's a giant 6x7 dead here. It's just littered with deadheads in this one canyon. And it's because it's the way out. And the wolves, I bet in the wintertime, they're just laying in there, just waiting.
Yeah.
And when they start coming through, they just start killing.
And in those situations, it's much like calving season. We were just up north hunting grizzly bear, and the moose all drop calves at the same time. Mother Nature knows what the
There's a term for that. I can't ever remember.
They're all dropping in the same 2 or 3 week window because they just flood the place with so much food that even though the wolves kill 50% of the moose calves or 60% in the grizzly bear, they can't kill them all because there's just so many.
Right.
And then what you end up with is 30% that survive and make it through to an older age or whatever that number is. And it's the same thing when they're migrating. They just are like, okay, everybody, 300 of us are going to shoot the gauntlet. 40 of us are going to be sacrificed. Yeah. That's just the way it goes.
But if we go one at a time,
they'll just kill us all.
Yeah.
So I think you're swarming the predator population with sacrificial food of the herd to try to get the rest through. And so
Brian, I always thought about like that when we were on our bear hunt, when you're in the back, right
Yeah.
at the back. I always thought kind of like that, like
sacrificial.
we're in Grizz country and Brian's back there. He's our sacrificial lamb. He's back in the back at his pace. And I thought if I just stay in the middle, they're going to either eat Ryan up front or they'll eat Brian in the back, and I'll be in good shape here and right here in the middle.
Yeah, there's no question that I was in the dangerous position.
All right.
Actually, Ryan could bump into him, so
that's right. That's why I liked where I was at, right in the middle.
I'm less worried about something creeping up behind us and stalking us from behind.
Yeah, right. You're right.
Than I am walking around a corner and running into a sow with cubs and just her doing her thing. You know,
that's right.
I'd rather take the chance. So that's it, folks.
Good one.
Yeah,
good.
The next one is going to be.
Oh shoot.
What is it, Mark?
All right, hold on. Let me look real quick. It is beetle kills.
Here we go.
And sparse timber.
All right, tune in next time for the beetle kill module. We're going to talk about that. And if you guys just want to go right in, check out Treeline Academy. You've got your course there. How much is the course, Mark?
The course is $119. With your discount, they get it for $99. And so there you go.
Yeah, use the code GRITTY.
Save yourself some money. And I love I love partnering with it, and
I appreciate it too.
And
it's a win-win, folks. It's a win-win. I don't think anyone that's ever purchased it that I've talked to. I was doing the elk summit up on the hill here over the summer. Every course I did, I prefaced it with, "Look, I'm going to talk to you guys for like an hour and a half, but I'm telling you, everyone in this class should just go get this e-scouting course because what you cover in that lengthy period of time is gold." And there was always 2 to 3 people in the class that had already purchased it, and I barely got through my like little spiel, and all of those people were like, "He's right. You all need to do this. Trust me. It's been a game changer."
Thank you.
It's really cool. So, folks, check that out, and then you are going to come out with some more modules like bear.
I'm adding. Well, I'm going to add to the course too.
Or mule deer rather and stuff.
We haven't said this yet, but your membership in the course, guys. There's a lot here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in some regards, maybe too much, but it's 30 modules currently, and it's about 26 hours of video. So it's pretty intense. This is not something you're going to do on the drive out to hunt. Yeah. This is something that needs to be invested in a little before your hunt. So actually, right now would not be a bad time.
To get started.
You're getting a little tight right now, but you still could pull it off. But remember, when I started doing this course, I knew it was going to be a lot. And so that's why I did the 2-year membership. So business-wise, that's probably wasn't the smartest decision. I've had a lot of people say, "Dude, that's stupid." I'm like, I don't feel like you can absorb what I've put in here, especially unless you've got a lot of experience and
free time.
Yeah. If you're a newer hunter, I feel like you need 2 years to hone your game in this area.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's a 2-year membership. So 2 full elk seasons.
That's pretty cool.
So check it
out.
So
check that out, folks. Use the code GRITTY over there. Thanks for tuning in. Look for the next one. It's on beetle kills, and stay gritty.